Hello everyone, this is Zooc, and today I'm going to be showing you how I draw a sword. I haven't done an instructional video in quite a long time, so this turned out to be a pretty good opportunity for me to draw something I enjoy and also talk about my reasoning for doing what I did. I've always been passionate about weapons, especially swords. They hold a special place in my heart. It's interesting to see how different civilizations designed them and with what purpose in mind, etc. So I've always had a thing for weapons ever since I was a kid. I used to draw them a lot. Obviously I sucked at it because I was a kid, but that didn't prevent me, and it didn't now either. Now I'm slightly better, as you can imagine. So yeah, I drew a sword. I came up with it myself. It's a sort of a mix between two different types of weapons, which are very good. One is the kukri machete, which is a blade used for basically slashing, cutting down lots of grass and wood. And the other one is a Bowie knife. A Bowie knife is one of the most popular combat knives and survival knives ever. It was designed by Jim Bowie, who fought in the Alamo, and it gained a huge following afterwards, especially in America. It's very popular. So I chose those two weapons and mixed them together to create what I think is a rather ideal weapon to have in any situation. I'm not an industrial designer. I haven't been officially trained in it, but I do like weapons a lot, and I have a pretty good idea of how something like that would feel in my hand. Just like your mom does, lol, not in my mind. So anyway, I chose to put it on a negative background because especially for objects made of metal, it's easier for you to see the light and where it shines, and it's easier to get a good contrast if you put it on a black background. If you've ever watched a concept designer draw, most of the good ones out there never draw on white. They usually just put a gray wash behind their drawings, simply because you can't really show highlights very well on something white. So anyway, let's get down to business. There are a few key things to keep in mind when designing a weapon. One of them is balance. The weapon can't be too heavy on either side, because if it's too heavy on the handle side, then you get no strength in cutting, and if it's too heavy on the blade side, then after a few swings it becomes really tiring, and it also diminishes the piercing power. So there needs to be a proper balance to get most out of both slashing and piercing, which is another principle upon which weapons are designed. How well does it pierce? You know, for example, a Renaissance style rapier is designed for piercing. You know, those really thin swords that the Three Musketeers used, they're not really designed for cutting a lot. They don't have a lot of weight to them. They don't have a lot of chopping power, but they pierce. They're the best weapons for that purpose. They're made to find the weak spots in the behind armor or in the human body generally and take them out really quick. And the ones that are made for slashing, I guess you could refer broadswords to that, even though broadswords are generally designed for both purposes. Chinese style swords are also mostly designed for slashing. They're pretty heavy on the blade side, but I mean, all swords can pierce. It's just down to who can do it or which one can do it better. For my sword, I chose to add a finger guard. Well, I guess I should explain the parts of the sword. One part is the blade. I think you can understand that. The other part is the hilt, which incorporates the guard, the grip, and the pommel, which is the tiny bit at the end. So in my hilt, I chose to add a finger guard as well, because quite frankly, I can't imagine why you wouldn't want one. And it's also spiked, and it's spiked in the same way a saw is spiked. So a lot of swords in ancient times and medieval times had spikes on the finger guard, but they weren't designed for cutting. This one is designed for slashing as well as punching with it, because in a combat situation, which is the situation for which I designed the sword, strictly with combat in mind, sometimes you can get pretty close to your opponent, just like in a boxing match. So you need something to take him out quick, because you can't really extend your arm so as to slash at them or pierce them if you have a sword in your hand. So a finger guard like this would come in very handy, because you could just slash them with it and also pierce vital parts of their body. I also decided to add a finger hole there, and no your mom jokes this time, even though I'm tempted, because at least being able to stick one finger in something, Jesus Christ, is better than no finger in anything. Sometimes when you slash like a madman, there's a chance that your blade slips from your hand. While if you have your index finger in that little hole, which can also be used for for your pinky, if you're holding the blade the other way, it makes it much more difficult for you to lose the blade from your hand. Now, right there, I'm starting to give the general shape of the blade. The top side of the blade is concave, and there's a reason for that. It's concave and it's also spiked because, again, I thought that if it comes down to getting close to your opponent, you can just place that concave part next to his leg or an arm and just pull, and it should saw it clean off. Because I'm not a big fan of double-edged blades, because sometimes there's a chance you can cut yourself. Obviously, a very skilled fighter won't do that, but I'm just saying I prefer blades with a saw. These aren't designed for wood; they're designed for flesh. So they rip through clothes and they rip through flesh. Because the way I made these spikes was, I thought that I shouldn't make them all the same height, because that would add a lot of weight. I also designed this blade with the keeping in mind that it needs to be somewhat balanced. So a lot of weight is not good, but at the same time, one spike higher and one lower will do more damage, because it'll have more. It'll be more streamlined. It'll have more, not aerodynamic. What's the word for it? It'll cut through smoother. With saws, generally saws get stuck a lot. While if the spikes are designed to be one shorter and one longer, they don't really do that. It's the same way a jackknife saw is designed, like the ones in your Swiss Army knives. Kind of the same thing if you've ever had one. A lot of blades used to have, or still do actually, the middle hollowed out. Not completely, but just a bit, just to reduce some of the weight in the blade. And a lot of knives nowadays have various edges hollowed out, like the one I'm drawing over there. That gets thinned out towards the top side, so it's not like a constant thickness to the blade. Also, the blade side is hollowed because it needs to come to a sharp edge, obviously. That makes a lot of sense. Generally, the middle part is the one that's the thickest, because when you're slashing and when you're chopping something hard like bone or wood, the shock needs to go somewhere so the blade doesn't bend. And if the middle part is the thickest, then that greatly reduces the possibility that the blade will bend. Now, if you notice there, I'm adding spheres to the blade. This is the same thing I talked about a minute ago, the hollowing out part. Adding spheres to something, or hollow spheres, it's a principle used by architects, and it's the same way bricks are made. You know, bricks are, at least in the US, I think, not over here, they're hollow on the inside, and they just to reduce their weight, and it removes very little durability, because a sphere has the ability to sustain more stress on it than a circle. Again, in architecture, people that design domed buildings do that. Or if you've ever tried to crush an egg in your hand by holding it at its two opposing sides, the thinner one and the thicker one, you'll see it's somewhat difficult because it can hold a lot of pressure. So same thing here. Reduces a lot of weight and doesn't really do much to the durability of the blade. It can still withstand a lot because, again, it's thicker in the middle. So let's see. Let's talk about the guard, I guess. The guard is the part that sort of extends at both sides of the blade. Bowie knives in the past were designed with guards, and still are sometimes, because everyone can make a Bowie knife. Every knife maker out there has a Bowie knife design of his own. So because they're made for combat, they're made to catch the opponent's blade so you can tear it from his hand. So if you see at the top part of the blade, right after the handle, there's a little guard that sort of extends out, and that's designed to catch a blade, and then you can twist your hand either up or down to remove it from your opponent's hand. Also on the bottom side, on the other side, there's a spike that's right next to the blade, which can also be used for the same purpose. Also, this particular blade is designed for, how do you say it? For the opponent's blade to glance off it and not hit you, because there's always a risk that if someone hits your blade with it, then it can glance into your face and then you're dead. So a lot of the parts of this weapon are made to deflect the hits of your opponent into a different direction, like the sawed part, which also can be used to catch a blade. It'll stop a blade. Also both sides of the handle. Also the spikes on the finger guard can also be used in the same way. That's because they're very close to each other, so they will catch a blade, And hell, even the spheres in the middle, I mean, those can easily, you can easily use your sword as a shield to catch a dagger or a knife and then just pull on it or twist it to tear it from your opponent's hand. So yeah, there's a lot of things to think about when designing a sword, even though it seems at a first glance like a simple item, you know, a piece of metal with an edge to it, but it's not. There's a lot of principles of not mechanics, I guess physics, to apply to a sword, and also making it more ergonomical. Like the handle, for example, if you check the handle, it's thicker at the guard side than it is at the end. That's because the amount you can grab with your index finger is more than what you can grab with your pinky. So it makes sense that a weapon wouldn't have a straight handle, because you don't get the same grip power as you do with something that's designed to fit your hand effectively. I'm not talking about your penis here. That's a pretty straight grip, if you want to call it. So yeah, I mean, I enjoy this sort of stuff because I get to do my own thing, and it's fun to design something that you think would work in real life. So I don't know if anyone out there is a weapon designer or an industrial engineer. Feel free to give your opinion on what I just made. But from at a first glance, it seems like something that would really work well. So I don't know why people don't try to apply more of these principles to weapon design. Some weapons I've seen out there in like World of Warcraft and games and movies, they really don't work. Like, who the hell needs a square-tipped sword? You can't pierce anything with it. A lot of the weapons in World of Warcraft are square-tipped or just completely absurd in their shape. So I don't know. I mean, sure, it's fantasy, but you know, the object is clearly made with a clear purpose to kill someone. So why not make it more efficient in that sense? So anyway, as for the drawing itself, it took me about 2.5 hours, and it's a fairly simple drawing, but it's a good exercise in trying to, especially when drawing something made exclusively of metal, trying to show volumes. For example, on the handle, you see there's a core shadow right under it, showing me that it's a cylinder. Also, the spikes also need to be drawn according to how the light falls on the weapon. Of course, in this case, it's a bit erratic because the weapon being the same color all over the place, it's kind of hard to show different values. So therefore I made part of the blade towards the tip more lighter than everything else, even though there's no light coming from under it, just to show like the separation of planes in the weapon. And yeah, it worked really well drawing it on something dark, because you can see the edges that shine in the light. It gives much greater sense of volume than if I were to draw it on white. So for people out there that want to start to learn how to draw, these are very good exercises because it's something fun. You're not drawing just spheres and squares. You're drawing an actual object, and it's very good to get down the basics of light and shadow and like textures. If you see on the handle, there's a texture of like, well, I guess you could compare it to Durex condoms, but it's not really ripped for her pleasure, it's more ripped for your pleasure, so the weapon doesn't slip and chop your leg off. So yeah, I know. I would really enjoy actually doing something like that in real life, like designing weapons, but I don't know how many people would buy them. I think gypsies would buy them here, but gypsies more prefer ninja swords and katanas more than these swords. I don't know. This is definitely something that I would carry with me in battle if it were, if it came down to that. So yeah, this is Zooc the Champ's weapon of choice. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you for my next videos. Bye bye.